I think we have quorum. Let's get started. So welcome to the September edition of the monthly OpenLineage TSC meeting. As usual, this is a recorded call. So this is being recorded as you got the warning. Then the notes and the recording will be linked on the LFAI wiki and the OpenLineage section. The video will be hosted on YouTube on the OpenLineage channel. So for people who missed it, we start those meetings by a roll call. So basically, I'll go in order on my screen and so I think we have mostly people who've been here before. Just quickly state your name, why you're here, if there's a topic you would like to discuss today, if you have a question or something or feedback, or if you just want to be here to listen in, this is also always welcome. So on my screen, I can see first Michael.
Hi, everyone. Michael Robinson. I'm the OpenLineage Community Manager. I'm here to take notes and talk about a recent release. Nice to see everybody.
And hi, I'm next on my screen. I'm Julien. I'm the project lead for OpenLineage. And today, there's one thing I added to the discussion at the end, which I started thinking about doing a proposal for a registry, OpenLineage registry. So just wanted to get people's opinion on this. It's fairly early, just an idea at the moment. Next on my screen is Paweł.
Hello, I'm Paweł. I'm software engineer at Getting Data and the contributor of OpenLineage and Marquez. I'm here to present Databricks integration test that I was working on some months ago.
Next is Ernie.
Ernie Ostick on the product team at Manta Software, and we continue to explore what we're going to be doing with OpenLineage. Right now, we can receive it, but we're looking at also emitting it.
Great. Maciej.
Hey, I'm Maciej. I'm software engineer at Getting Data. Today, I'm only to listen, discuss. Yeah, and as you can see, I like cats.
Who doesn't? Next, no, it's not an actual question. Next,
Hi, I'm Paweł. I'm on the engineering team at Astronomer. I'm mostly here for the discussion and to listen to what people have to present. And I have one animal that does not like cats, which is my dog right here. So there you go, Julien.
Why do you hate cats? All right. Next on my screen is Mars. Welcome, Mars.
Hi, thank you. First time here, Mars, CTO, co-founder of Metaphor. Speaking out, going with the cat theme, our logo, some say looks like a cat hat. So I'll let you guys be the better judge there. But we recently integrated with OpenLineage. I think we are probably one of the latest consumers, and we'll actually be presenting our work at the upcoming OpenLineage meetup in Toronto. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Next is Harsh.
Hey, so today I'm here as an active listener just to see what's the latest releases and all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sherry.
Hi, I'm Sherry Cabral, and I am a product manager for Lineage at Calibra. And I'm here to participate in this discussion and be a great community member and evangelist of OpenLineage.
Nice. And so that concludes the first round an introduction. The next slide is just a quick, easy way to find all the important means of communication. The meetings page is how you can get yourself invited to this. If you want a reminder, you find the information for this particular meeting and having a reminder on your calendar. The main mean of communication in between those meetings is the Slack. So you're inviting to join the Slack. That's the best place to ask questions or communicate. And of course, there's GitHub to open issues and open pull requests and so on. And we have a few other things. The mailing list is mainly for announcement. The wiki will have the notes of this meeting and keeping track of those meetings. Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Mastodon, the newsletter will have information about new releases, blog posts, all of this. The YouTube channel has typically the recording for this meeting and some related talks that happen. For today, so we'll start with, I have a couple of announcements of coming events. Then Michael will talk about the recent releases and Paweł will talk about the Spark integration. And then we have the more open discussion in the end. So I put my own topic about having an OpenLineage registry, but you're welcome to add more if you like. Okay. So an announcement, quickly, the ecosystem survey is live, and so you're welcome to participate and share about what you care about in the OpenLineage roadmap, what you're doing with it, and so on. You can find it on bit.ly at /ecosystem_survey. Oh yeah, one important thing that happened, if you missed it, 2 weeks ago, there was a Google Cloud Next conference. And one exciting thing for the OpenLineage community is they announced that Databricks is now supporting consuming OpenLineage. You can also use Dataproc to send OpenLineage and produce OpenLineage. And so this is exciting. So I think this came after we started talking about Metaphor using OpenLineage. So, you know, you're not even the most recent. But this is great. You're in good company. Next, so 2 meetups. So as Marsh was mentioning, we have a meetup in Toronto, an OpenLineage meetup next Monday. So in 4 days. It's the night before the Airflow Summit in Toronto at 5 p.m. And so if you're traveling to Toronto for the Airflow Summit, this is an easy night. If you don't know what to do the night before, you can come to the OpenLineage meetup. There'll be a presentation from Metaphor, and we're also going to talk about the new Airflow OpenLineage provider, since this is co-located with the Airflow conference, and there's going to be a lot of Airflow users or contributors in the meetup. And there's going to be a Marquez meetup in San Francisco in October as well. So you can find the details on the OpenLineage website if you want to sign up and participate.
Actually, sorry to jump in there. I see there's actually almost nearly 50 people sign up for the Toronto meetup. Is that kind of the normal crowd? I have no idea this is our first time participating, or this is tend to be on the bigger side.
It is. So when we did a meetup co-located with the Spark Summit in San Francisco, we got the same amount of sign-up. So you have to be prepared that between the online sign-up for a meetup and how many people actually show up, right? There's you have to divide by a constant, right? So we're not going to have 50 people at the meetup. So it's probably, I don't know, probably 20 something or if we look at historically between the number of signups and how many people show up, it's probably more like this. But yeah, so I think when we collocate the meetup with a conference, it's a good way to have more attendance because people are not already traveling. So you don't get only local people and get people who don't have the opportunity. Right. So I'll also at the Airflow Summit, we'll have a few talks. So I have a talk that I'm going to talk about open source communities, how to tend to your community like you tend to your garden. Maciej will talk about comprehensive talk about the OpenLineage Airflow new provider. And Michael will talk about his project on looking at OpenLineage support for SQL Alchemy. And you're welcome to subscribe to the newsletter. The newsletter has a great content if you want to regularly receive a summary of everything that happened in the community. This is a great way to follow. And kudos on Michael for managing the newsletter.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Nope. So I'll hand it on to Michael to talk about the recent release.
Julien, thanks for the shout out. And I have one release to share about. In 1.1.0, we added support for configuring OpenLineage based on the Flink integration. So now Flink configuration entries starting with OpenLineage are passed to the client. We also added some missing Java docs to the Java client. And in Spark, we solved the problem of multiple jobs writing to different data sets with the same job name. This is enabled by default now, but that can be turned off with an environment variable. And then more specifically about this new behavior, the job names are unified on the Databricks platform. But this default behavior can also be disabled. We're using a .job part separator instead of an underscore. There's more information about this new configuration in the release notes, so please check those out. We also bumped the Spark version supported by our integration tests to 3.4.1. I wanted to just briefly give a shout out to our new contributors, Pentium 3 and Algorithming 1. But thank you to all our contributors for the changes they added. Check out the release notes for details about the many bug fixes in 1.1.0. Thank you.
Just to cut for a minute. Now, remember that Airflow is developed inside the Airflow project, so we don't have those changes actually in this changelog, but in the Airflow project itself.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good point. Probably we should also talk about, so now the OpenLineage Airflow integration is not part of the OpenLineage project anymore. It's an Airflow OpenLineage provider. Should probably mention those releases as well in here, even if it's part of the Airflow project.
Thank you much.
Okay, any questions? So Paweł will demo the Spark integration test in Databricks runtime. So Paweł, I will release the screen, I'm assuming.
Okay.
And we'll remind you to share.
Wait a second, I got lost here. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, so thank you for time. Thank you for introduction, Michael. So in the last release, we upgraded the Spark version to 3.4.1, but yesterday they released 3.5, I think. So we're not up to date, but we're close to that and we're following them. And today I'm going to tell you a story of a Databricks integration test, and a lot of fun has been around it, at least for me. So Our OpenLineage Spark integration is pretty popular because many people are using Spark and would like to extract lineage from that, and Databricks is a popular runtime for Spark. But from time to time, we are getting the issues like this. Hey, something is not working on Databricks. And, the issue contains a stack trace, and somewhere deep down the stack trace, one can find there is no such method like aggregate expression class has no result ID method. And, the issue was assigned to me. I looked at it and said, hey, but, the vanilla Spark has such a method. What can we do with this? And it turns out that perhaps vanilla Spark has such method, but on Databricks runtime, there is no such method, and instead they do have result IDs method on that class. And at the end, we end up with a fix that solves the problem, but is not the best looking code, I would say, because it checks, hey, do you have result ID method? If not, let's use the reflection to call the result IDs method. And the problem with this code is that we couldn't do any good test for that. So, if a new contributor comes to see the code base and asks a question, can we get rid of it? We can get rid of this code because it's not covered in any test. So there was a need for us to, be able to verify such changes, such behavior, and to speed up working on such issues. Because if you do it manually, you have to build a jar, upload it to Databricks, start up a cluster, turn on OpenLineage and Spark session and see what you can get. And it was not possible. So the issue is from May. It was not possible at that time. Fortunately, in the early summer, Databricks released Databricks SDK Java library, which is developed rapidly. So each week they're releasing a new version. It has just 13 stars. So it's pretty new, but it's cool because you can do a lot from the Java code at the Databricks runtime. So what's important for us, one could start a cluster, create a cluster, upload a file onto DBFS. For us, it's uploading OpenLineage jar. One can upload an init script, assign init script to a cluster, and run a job. So that's all we needed to run an integration test, yeah. And the still missing part was, okay, but how do we capture the lineage events? Because we don't want to set up a web server publicly. So the missing part was to implement on our side the file transport, which allows saving OpenLineage events to a file locally on a computer. And and these were all the bricks that were missing before to make it happen. So we've prepared a change that allowed the file transport on our side. And whenever we have some job that we would like to test, at the beginning, we configure it to output OpenLineage events to a file. And then at the end of the tested job, we move that file to DBFS, because DBFS can be accessed from the place where the integration test is run. So I'm able to run my integration test from my laptop, and it creates a cluster, does all the configuration stuff, runs this job. At the end, the event files are written to a file, and then I'm able through DBFS to capture the file and to see if those events contain the things that that I wanted to verify. And and then that's something that really speeds up our work and allows us to have better code. And actually, we just needed to wait a few weeks to have a new contributor to OpenLineage who made use of it and prepared to tests for wide and narrow transformations to verify that the events contain what we expect. So I don't think it's a huge change to the project, but within the aspect of supporting OpenLineage Spark on Databricks, it's really helpful, and I really hope it will be helpful to other contributors either, to speed up our work and have more coverage of Spark integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question? Yeah. I can share my screen again. Pardon, this is the Zoom era. We spend a lot of our time waiting for making sure you can see my screen. So last item. So do we have is there anything else people wanted to discuss before I start rambling on registry? Okay. So OpenLineage registry. So it's something I believe it came up in conversations several times over the past months or maybe more. Plural. And the idea is in OpenLineage, we have the notion of producer, right? Which is a name that identifies a producer of OpenLineage. So for example, Ernie was talking about producing lineage. So we'd have a producer for Manta, right? That would be defined. And similarly, you can have custom facets, and custom facets have a prefix, which also is a name. And that creates a namespace for other entities that produce facet to define their own custom facet in their own namespace. And up until now, this is a bit underdefined. So you can use a name and you're not supposed to reuse a name that someone else is using. And this is kind of distributed. So for example, in Airflow, now that Airflow has its own integration part of the Airflow project, we have an Airflow facet, which is prefixed with Airflow. And we want to be able to define a registry for those things. So I started, it's really early, I started a Google Doc that I will share in the Slack channel after the meeting. And for now, I just it's just been one-to-one conversation between some member of the community. So it's time to make this a little bigger. This is definitely not a final proposal. This is kind of like halfway through the thinking. Is definitely requesting feedback or other ideas, or this is really to get the conversation started. So the two goals I listed at the top level is to allow third parties to register their implementation or custom extension to make them easy to discover, right? So I have one place when you can say, look, there's Manta, there's Metaphors, there's Colibra, there's Airflow as external implementation of OpenLineage, and this is where you can find their documentation. And this is the custom facet they declare, and so on. And another goal is to shorten the producer and schema URL values that some users in the community have complained about. Right now, those are URLs, which makes it very extensible. You can declare your producer by adding the URL to where it lives somewhere on the web, or same thing for your custom facet schemas. You just need to make them published somewhere on a public URL, but they become a little bit verbose when they are replicated in each facet. So I listed those two as goals, and I listed as things that would benefit from being defined in a registry, the custom facet prefix, the producer URI to full URL of to the documentation of the producer, and the list of facets they produce, and same thing for consumers. Where is the root documentation for a consumer, what facet they consumes, and what you expect from them being a consumer of OpenLineage. And some of the requirements, the idea of custom facet is producer can create and evolve their custom facet without requiring any approval, right? Custom facets are an easy way to extend the spec without being dependent on building a consensus before you can use them, right? You can experiment without requiring any approval. And producer and consumer can update the list of facets they produce or consume without requiring approval. URIs should be short. A register name can be both a producer and a consumer. So Ernie, thank you for being a good example again. So currently you're consuming OpenLineage, but you could be both a producer and a consumer. Egeria is also producing and consuming OpenLineage. So those are kind of the baseline. So before I wrote down a little proposal more as the basis for discussion, straw man kind of thing, but it's not necessarily meant to be the final design. It's just meant to get the conversation started. And so, but before I go into that, were there any opinions on whether this is a good goal, these are the right requirements?
Hello, Julien. It's Mandy. I'm sorry I was late joining.
No worries.
I think it's a good idea. I wonder if there should be facets should be themed as well, because we don't want every producer to define their own facets. We want as many people to use as many common facets as possible. So whether if there was a sort of set of themes, like these are data facets and these are, I don't know, metering facets and various other things. So you see those clustering in one perspective on the registry, and then the idea that these are the people that consume. Sorry, these are the people that sort of own the facet, and then these are the producers and consumers. So you can look at it from different perspectives, but we don't want every producer coming up with custom facets for the same things, if that makes sense.
So it's kind of would be easier to converge and have people
defined, yes. So to say, oh, I want to do a custom facet for this, and then oh, wait a minute, there already is one, and the part of the problem with naming the facet by a particular technology means that people would feel, oh, well, okay, if that's the Airflow facet, then I need to produce a new one for Egeria, even though it's got exactly the same content, because I don't feel I should be allowed, it seems to imply that it only comes out of Airflow. Does that make sense?
Yes. So for example, in the Airflow facet, so the Airflow integration using the core facets with schemas and all the standard things, it has an Airflow facet for things that are very specific to Airflow, and in particular,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it has a model of what an Airflow task look like, right? And what's the Airflow schedule look like? So things that are very Airflow specific. So that the benefits of the custom facet here, it benefits, you have some generic things, and you're right? So when you create a custom facet, there's also sometimes we'll add core facets as well. And then there's things that are very specific to what people are doing.
And that makes sense. Now I've been working on an integration with Apache Atlas, and I think in the core types there are 4 definitions of relational database, and when you look at Microsoft Azure, you see even more definitions of relational databases, and it's because the types are aligned with technologies, even though they're actually the same content. And that's really what made me sensitive to the fact that when the data definitions are closely tied to technologies, you end up with a lot of duplication.
Yes.
So
that-
just to add to what Mandy's saying, I think this is a good step that takes it from the wild, wild west. And
Mhm.
at least a step in that right direction. One thought perhaps that would make sense would be something stated in the proposal that talks about what does it take for something that is in the registry to then become a core facet. You know, maybe there's a protocol to getting there.
I like it.
yeah.
Mhm.
So we do have like a contribution in the contributing. I think there's a template for adding to the spec that can be probably improved. So the idea is to be a custom facet, you know, there's no, you do whatever you want, right? That's, well, the only constraint is you need to have a prefix to the facet name, so it's not going to collide with other core facets in the spec. So as long as you're in your namespace, you can define what you want. You just need to publish the schema of your facet. And then to be a core facet, well, you know, you open a proposal on the OpenLineage project and you can leverage your usage of your custom facet to show that, look, we're using it this way, it works. That validates this.
I wonder if this maybe I think we're getting too fancy here, but maybe there could be a state in the registry about the facet to say that it's purely private, or that it's a proposal, or that, you know, maybe to sort of show whether something is in the process of actually being adopted. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't think it's overthinking it, because we do have this, right? There's some custom facets that are specifically like they're in the domain of that producer, and so therefore they should live in the registry in there. And some of them is just, oh, we didn't have this concept and we wanted to use it. Sherry, go ahead.
Thanks. I wanted to interject and say this is great and I love it, especially as you know, a third party myself. I think it's awesome. This is gives me something that I would want as a third party. But I also am concerned with, like, what is OpenLineage getting from this? And it's a lot of like, what I'm seeing OpenLineage is getting from this is, you know, bringing the community together, having a one place to see these kinds of things. And I would love to add, I don't know if it's a requirement, it's a must-have or a should-have. I would love to see producers not just have documentation, but an example and perhaps a test, maybe not a suite, but a test. You know, because I know that this is something we've been wanting for a while and it hasn't really gotten off the ground. And for consumers, I think they could also provide a test of, like, here's what we consume and here's what we don't. So if you give us your code, we can tell you what we're gonna, you know, is it gonna give an error or what?
So by a test, you mean a sort of set of payloads that you need that are typical from that runtime, or do you mean actually running the runtime to produce the events sort of as part of the test?
Yeah, so I meant the latter, and I may not have said that I would like to see examples too, and so that would cover the former. So both, I would like both. You know, a consumer might not have, you know, an example payload. So it might be something where, like, maybe a consumer, you know, should provide a test, but a producer should provide a payload. But I do think that it's something where if we put it in a registry, which is something that producers and consumers really want, because they want to, you know, be on the registry, then we might be able to get the stuff that will facilitate everything all around, like the tests.
Yeah, so one thing, so for example, what we've done for the core spec, so in the core spec, you know, you have the definition of facets here. So you have the JSON schema for each facet, and for some of them, there's a bit of documentation. And the other thing that recently was introduced, I think Jakub added this, is for each of the core facets, we have an example of, okay, so I'll pick one that is, like, for example, this one should have, right, we have an example of what this looks like. And I think we added this so that we added to the CI something that will check the validity of all the example against the JSON schema that we have in the spec, right? So that's a test for the specs, making sure all the JSON schema is well formed and they validate the examples that are put in here.
That's great. Who did that? Sorry, Julien, who did that?
I think Jakub is one of the part of getting data. And
brilliant. That's really great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's this is Jakub, this is his GitHub handle. Yes, and so we did this recently to just make sure. So I think this is, Sherry, this is like a small part of what you're asking. I'm sure this more could be done in there. I was thinking of also making it easier for producers to describe what facet they're producing, because even if they're producing some core facet, they might be using it in a different way, right? They could use a subset of the schema, or like, you know, the examples might be a bit different. So you have more of that. As you can see, this was added 2 months ago, so it's relatively recent.
Right. No, that's great. And if there's a framework for testing, that would also be amazing. Something where, you know, if a producer can put in, you know, some kind of example or a template or something, then it can be pulled into the other tests, right? Maybe they don't have to write the test, but they have to give enough information for the test to be generated.
Yeah. So right now, I think this will use schema. I think a JSON schema validation, right? So it does verify that all those examples parse against the JSON schema that we publish in the spec, which is like just a small portion of what you're describing. It's like the bare minimum, right? Like your example should validate against the schemas.
Right, but it's a start.
Yeah.
Right.
So what you
want?
Basically,
I want to make sure that we're not going to get behind in the testing when there are more facets being added, right? Because it's
So, you know, so part of this, and I put producers and consumers. I think producers need more of their registry mechanism, right? Because the producers, they will create facets or create their own facet potentially, right? If it's a third-party producer and they may have their own custom facets, so it's a way to make them like explicitly defined, and you know what to expect and you know where to find them. And they need shorter name for the producer URL and the schema URL. But consumers would be interested in as well, right? So that's a way to say, hey, look, this is the list of facets we're consuming, right? There's some facets you might be ignoring, you know, they're not interesting to you, and there's some facets you might be actually using. So it's also a way to describe this. So today, you know, on the OpenLineage website, we have an ecosystem page where you can find the consumers and the producers, like also people who talk in the ecosystem of how they're using it. So some of them are open source, some of them are proprietary integration, and it points to the documentation and so on. But I think, it would be a great way to have a more programmatic definition of all of this, right?
Absolutely.
So I did a quick proposal, but really, you know, treat this as a straw man, right? Like, feel free to propose something completely different. There's a bit of a discussion between, should the registry be completely self-contained, or should it delegate to other registry, right? Like, for example, the list of facets I produce or the list of schema URL. As a third party, would you prefer having access right to your repository in OpenLineage project that you can update the schema of your facets? Or would you prefer publish it yourself on your own website and put pointers to this in the registry? Of course, the downside of that, if we have a self-contained registry inside OpenLineage, we can run checks against it, right? Like, you cannot modify it in a way that it's going to break. You can add CI against it. Let's say if we have a file in the GitHub repository, we can check and we can make sure it's always valid. If it delegates to pointer on another website, then we cannot guarantee that those are going to change in the way that they are valid. And it's kind of, some things can disappear overnight. So there's a bit of trade-off in how independent definers of custom facet are versus how we can guarantee a self-contained, consistent, valid repo. And some of the things this would, once you define your name and you put a list of information, the root URL, where your schemas are, then you can use shorter name like this, right? So the custom facet prefix is the name you declare. Your producer URI, instead of a long URL, I was proposing OL : the name as short. For the schema URL prefix, you can do OL : the name, : the path, right? And that way you can make much shorter. So this is an example of this. Could be using Ernie, like here, an example in the spec. Use you as an example. Could use someone else. Sorry, not picking on you. And then that some of the benefits is, facet URLs become much shorter. I had a bit of a question, what does that mean? What does that look like for core facets, right? And there's a bit of versioning. So it's just really, and again, this is to get the conversation starting, and there's a bunch of questions in there. So I think there's been some discussion of, should there be a registry repo in the OpenLineage GitHub organization? Should that be a registry folder under spec, simply so that you can put all your custom schemas and define your name here in using a JSON file that contains this information, and so on. So that was the current thinking. It's very early. I think this overall would be useful. There's many different ways this can be implemented, right? So if we compare the Maven repository, for example, and how you publish to Sonatype to get published in Maven in a self-service manner versus just checking in file in a GitHub repo, like think Bitnami Helm charts function this way, which is people just merge them there, but there's kind of a bit of an approval process right now. We can use owner's file in a repo to say, well, representative of this entity, whether it's the Airflow project or, a vendor like Menta. I think whether you're Egeria in an open source project or you're a vendor of a commercial product, we can put an owner's file and say, oh, those are the people who can approve updates to that folder in the registry. But there, and we can use CI to verify everything's consistent, and you cannot merge something that breaks the registry.
Yeah, I hate to be a product manager, but my question would be, how have other communities handled this? Because we can talk about the pros and cons, but we can also look at what has been successful for the kinds of organizations we think are going to use this. Right, a smaller organization might not have, it might be more flexible, and a smaller organization might not have the time to go to somebody else's repo, but it also might be more flexible. Whereas a larger organization might be like, oh, if you want to put something in somebody else's repo, now you have to go through 7 levels of legal.
Yes. So are you asking me hard data on, how to make a decision? We should make data-driven decisions. I agree. So, there's also a trade-off on how much effort it is to put this in place. So, if you look at something like the Maven repository, you create an account, you can push to it. I think, for small organization, it might be just easier to add a few files in an existing open source repo than having to create your own and figure out how to publish those things. If you're big organization that have to ask legal to contribute anything will anyway add friction, I think. We've worked with those companies, and there's just like need to ask approval for anything public, whether they host it or it's hosted by another open source project.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's a bit of the main trade-off for me is like how complicated it is for us to maintain, and whether how self-service it is for any producer to maintain their things without having to request, special attention for the community, because even if we pay attention, right, it always adds latency. And if you're releasing a new version of something, you might not want to add like, oh, and I need my PR approved in the process, or things like that. So yeah, I'm not sure what's the best trade-off, but putting it out there.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So what I will do, I will share this on the OpenLineage Slack for feedback. And, eventually, so this is just a draft doc for, a way of sharing ideas, right? The next step is to follow the OpenLineage proposal process, which is opening a PR, which is putting this in Markdown. And but I think I'll do that. Or if someone else is, very excited about driving this, we can, someone else can do it if they want. But otherwise I can drive this. But before I get to that stage, it's just wanted to have more feedback, and we can I was talking with Willie yesterday, like it's just some random, and there's some other ideas that I can add on how we could implement that. So some example we looked at, there's the Maven repository or Bitnami. Bitnami is a company that maintains a repository of Helm charts. And the way they do it is just through a GitHub repository where everybody check-ins. When I can look it up for you right now. But they don't even have a maintenance delegation, right? So if you go in there, you have Helm charts. So Helm charts allow to deploy services inside Kubernetes, right? So you would have a Bitnami Airflow Helm chart with how to deploy Airflow in Kubernetes. They will have a bunch of different open source projects. Flink is another open source project, and you have template on how to deploy Flink. And so this is how they maintain it, right? You have a folder for each thing. So you could imagine you could have Airflow, Egeria, Manta, and so that they can each declare new facets optionally, right? You don't have to define custom facets, or what facet you produce, or like provide examples to, that would be a place where people could put examples of what it generates to help with validation. So this is one example. And the other one is the Maven repository. The Maven repository is not using GitHub, right? There's a service that is hosted. If you want to publish open source project to a Maven repository, typically you create an account with Sonatype, you get your own repo, there's a UI. When you upload files as part of your release process, then you can go approve your release and it's going to publish it. So this is the more heavy-handed thing, which I don't think we want to build something like that. I would leverage, existing infrastructure like GitHub, I would think. But if people have other examples, that's very welcome as well. So those are the two I looked at so far. Oh, sorry, I missed. All right. I'm looking at the messages. Okay. Any other question? Or things you want to just tell people, or things you hate about OpenLineage or love about OpenLineage, or otherwise we can wrap up. Don't speak all at the same time.
I'm just
I
working
love
on
the transparency of making new decisions and questions to the community of OpenLineage. How's that?
Yeah, I was just
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. I think there's a bit of a delay. I'm working on a bid for a customer, and I think we're going to use OpenLineage and Nigeria together to do metering of data use. And I don't know if it's been used in that way before, but it's looking like a very nice partnership between sort of workflows like using Airflow and things, moving data through, and then Nigeria sort of kicking off and maintaining and counting the data usage. So we'll see how that goes.
Great. So are you using the there's some support for data matrix in Open.
Yes, the counting of the records and things. I thought that was going to be useful.
Yeah, you have there's output statistic, output data assets. So yeah, so right now it's relatively simple. How many rows were written in the output? How many?
But that's the sort of level I think we're at. So I thought that would fit very nicely.
Yeah, so I think in particular in Spark, you have this. When using BigQuery, you have this because BigQuery tells you. Yeah, that's part of what we can document better of who produces what part.
Yeah, I like it.
Nice. Okay. Well, have a great afternoon, day, morning, everyone. And we'll follow up. So this will be posted on the YouTube channel for anybody who missed it. Slack is the best place to follow up on the conversation. And I post this Google Doc for feedback there.
Bye.